I moved the money. It's better this way. That's all the email said. No greeting. No Dan. No I'm sorry. Just one line and an attached photo. The kind that does more damage than anything typed. Lauren was standing on a balcony somewhere coastal, bathed in sunset. Her hair was curled just the way she used to wear it when we were dating. Wine glass in hand. And beside her, a man. Beard. Relaxed posture. Hand on the small of her back like it had been there for months. She was supposed to be in Sedona. At a wellness retreat. That's what she told me last Thursday. Digital detox, she said, like she needed space to breathe. Like she hadn't already been gone for months. My name is Daniel Cross. I'm 43. I design custom homes along the West Coast. We live in Mill Valley, just across the bridge from San Francisco. 11 years married. No kids, her decision, not mine. She owns a wellness brand. Skin serums. Detox kits. All sold under the lie of alignment. The money she tried to steal? $312,000. My inheritance from my Aunt Judith, the only person who ever truly looked out for me after my parents died. That money was meant to be a foundation. It came with a note that read, "Build something that lasts." Lauren had other plans. She thought I wouldn't notice. She thought I wouldn't act. What she didn't know was that I'd seen it coming. The late-night texts, she said, were clients. The VPN on her phone, she couldn't explain. The new passcodes on our joint accounts changed without a word. I didn't accuse. I didn't raise my voice. I waited. I called Thomas Ellis, a litigator in Palo Alto, 2 months ago. Told him I didn't have proof yet, but I had a feeling. That was enough for him to put a forensic accountant on standby. I restructured the trust with Judith's estate lawyer. Moved the funds. Secured the accounts. Set up automated alerts for every attempted access. Lauren never noticed. She was too busy laying the groundwork for her escape, or what she thought would be one. So when that email came in at 11:12 p.m. on a Sunday night, I didn't panic. I took a screenshot, forwarded it to Thomas, saved the image. Then I walked into the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and stared out at the dark backyard she never bothered to landscape. My phone buzzed. A text from Lauren. "Did you see the email?" I locked the screen. I didn't need to reply. She'd already told me everything I needed to know. I didn't respond to her text. There was nothing left to ask. I had what I needed, in her own words, with a timestamp and visual confirmation that she wasn't where she claimed to be. At 7:04 the next morning, I met Thomas Ellis at his office in Palo Alto. I'd already forwarded him the email and the photo. He had them printed out and waiting on the conference table. "She committed financial fraud," he said simply, sliding the photo across the table. "That's an admission. If we act fast, we'll control the narrative before she even realizes what she's done." The inheritance had been placed in an irrevocable trust 6 weeks ago, entirely in my name, completely separate from marital assets. Lauren had no legal right to it. But her attempt to access it wasn't just a moral failure. It was criminal intent, and we had the digital trail to prove it. Thomas looped in a private forensic accountant, Janice Park. Sharp, quiet, brutal. She'd already flagged 3 unauthorized login attempts from an IP address traced to Encinitas, California. Lauren wasn't in Sedona. She was in a luxury condo by the beach, paid through a shell company called Red Horizon Wellness LLC. Registered 3 months ago, using an address that had also shown up in old tax records tied to one of her former business partners. Or rather, her new partner. The man in the photo. His name was Reed Warren. Thomas pulled it before I even had to ask. Former wealth advisor, barred in 2018 for breach of fiduciary duty. Rebranded himself as a mindfulness coach for high-net-worth individuals. Perfect match for Lauren. By noon, we had the condo lease, the IP logs, and 4 months of bank records showing small transfers out of our joint checking account into an account under Warren Redman Holdings. Her name and his merged into one entity. That's when the story changed. At 1:17 p.m., she texted again. "You're overreacting." I didn't actually move anything. I was just looking at options. Translation. She realized I hadn't responded, and silence scared her more than shouting. I muted the thread. Thomas prepped the initial filing. Divorce on grounds of financial misconduct. California's not a fault state, but with documentation like this, a judge could freeze all joint assets immediately. We'd also be filing for an emergency protective order on the trust. Not because it wasn't safe, but because the attempt itself added leverage. "This is textbook," Thomas said, tapping the printed email again. "You give her enough rope, and she ties it herself." I went home and walked through the house slowly. It felt staged now, like a model home. The wine glasses she left by the sink. The yoga mat still rolled in the corner. Like she'd known she wasn't coming back, but wanted to keep up the illusion a little longer. By evening, she called again. I let it ring out. Then I opened our cloud storage, the one we used for documents, receipts, and remodel plans, and found a folder titled Legal Financial. Inside, screenshots of my accounts, notes on security questions, a draft of an email she'd written weeks ago with subject line, transition plan. She hadn't just tried to steal my money. She'd planned the whole exit. And now it was my turn to plan hers. The next morning, the motion was filed. Thomas submitted the petition for divorce and the emergency financial freeze. The moment Lauren received the paperwork, everything would shift. I didn't wait to hear from her. I wasn't interested in what she had to say anymore. She'd already spoken with her actions, the transfers, the lease, the attempts to get into accounts she had no legal claim to. But I kept collecting. At 10:42 a.m., Janice sent me a new batch of records. She'd gone deeper into our joint account history and found a total of $46,200 funneled to Warren Redman Holdings over the past 4 months. Always just under the threshold that would trigger automated fraud flags. All labeled as vague business expenses, consulting, wellness sourcing, supplier research. Each one approved by Lauren. None of them mentioned to me. It wasn't just theft. It was laundering. At 2:03 p.m., I got a call from Rita, the estate attorney who'd structured Judith's trust. "You did well to move fast," she said. "The attempts we flagged last week weren't isolated. We've documented 6 over the past month. All failed, all from locations linked to that condo in Encinitas." I didn't need confirmation anymore. I needed containment. At 4:15 p.m., my phone buzzed again. "We need to talk. I'm back in town." Back in town. Like she was returning from a yoga retreat, not in a fair-funded relocation attempt. She didn't even knock on the front door. She stood in the driveway with sunglasses on, like she could will this back into normal with a well-rehearsed apology and a tight-lipped performance. I met her outside. "Dan, listen," she started, voice low and calm, like we were in a couple's workshop. "Everything's gotten blown out of proportion." I didn't respond. "I didn't move the money," she added quickly. "I just looked into options. We've both been feeling stuck. You logged into my trust 4 times. That was a mistake," she said. "Reed told me." She stopped, just for a second, but it was enough. I raised an eyebrow. "So it was Reed?" Her silence was the answer. "I have the logs," I said. "I have the lease. The transfers. The emails you drafted in our shared folder. You didn't just make a mistake. You made a map." Her face shifted, just slightly. From practiced guilt to something harder. Offended, maybe. Like she couldn't believe I'd done exactly what she would have done. "I want to keep this civil," she said finally. "Then you should have planned your exit better." She didn't have a response to that. She turned and walked back to her car, leaving behind the last shreds of whatever persona she'd tried to wear. Inside, I emailed Thomas. She made contact. We stayed the course. Because there was still more to come. I hadn't even dropped the evidence on her attorney yet. 3 days later, Lauren showed up to the preliminary hearing with a new attorney, Philip Barnes. Big name, big retainer. The kind of guy who wins by exhausting his opponent into settling. He tried to downplay the financial misconduct claim. Said Lauren had inquired about marital finances, that the transfer attempt was misinterpreted exploration, and that the joint account withdrawals were common practice in shared businesses. Then Thomas stood. "Your Honor," he said, calm as ever, "we'd like to submit a forensic timeline, verified by independent analysts, showing 6 unauthorized login attempts to the respondent's personal inheritance trust, all within the last 30 days. He handed the judge a slim folder. "And we've also submitted documentation of a fraudulent lease signed by Ms. Cross under a shell company, and $46,200 in joint funds transferred to an account shared with Mr. Reed Warren, a known associate who has previously been investigated for financial misconduct." The courtroom went silent. Barnes flipped through the pages, his jaw tightening. Lauren didn't look at me once. The judge reviewed the packet in silence, eyes scanning the paper slowly, deliberately. Then she looked up. I'm granting the emergency freeze on all joint accounts. The trust remains protected. We'll reconvene in 10 days to determine asset division. Barnes leaned toward Lauren and whispered something. She didn't react. 10 minutes later, the hearing ended. Outside the courtroom, Thomas and I walked in silence. Then his phone buzzed. He checked it, smirked slightly, and turned to me. "You'll like this," he said. "Barnes just formally withdrew as her counsel." I raised an eyebrow. "He doesn't represent clients who lie to him," Thomas added. "She didn't tell him about the lease, or the money, or the attempted access. He found out in the courtroom, same as everyone else." Lauren was standing alone down the hall, staring at her phone, thumb frozen in mid-scroll. No lawyer, no plan, no script left to follow. I kept walking. I had nothing left to say to her. The system she thought she could manipulate had just turned against her. And that was just the prelude. 3 days after the hearing, Lauren's company website changed. Her name was quietly removed from the founder's message. Her bio disappeared. I checked the team page, gone. I didn't gloat. I just took a screenshot. That same evening, I received a message from a former colleague of hers. Anonymous email, no subject line. "Thought you should know. Her investors are pulling out." One of them saw the court filing. She never told them about the trust. Or you. Attached was a memo from an internal meeting. Terms like reputational risk, unauthorized personal funding, and suspension of equity rights jumped off the page. She hadn't just failed legally. She'd broken trust with people who backed her for years. And now, like any fragile structure built on bad footing, her empire was beginning to tilt. Meanwhile, Thomas moved to secure a formal financial audit of all accounts Lauren had touched in the last 18 months. We weren't just looking for what she took. We were building a ledger of how long she'd been taking it. Janice flagged 3 more accounts, all in names slightly altered from her own. Lauren J. Cross. L. Janice Warren. A fake LLC using her mother's maiden name. It was calculated, intentional, and possibly felonious. Thomas smiled when he read the file. "If this becomes criminal," he said, "we don't just win. We bury her." But I wasn't chasing jail time. I didn't need her punished. I just needed the truth to exist, officially, in court, on paper. No more shadows. No more charm. No more second version of the story. Lauren tried calling again that night. I didn't answer. She texted, "We need to find peace. We were good once." I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then I archived the conversation. Because whatever she was referring to no longer existed. And hadn't for a long, long time. A week passed without contact. Then Thomas called me late Thursday afternoon. "She's trying to negotiate," he said. "Through a lawyer?" "No. She's emailing the mediator directly. Wants to reframe the process. Thinks she can still settle quietly." I said nothing. "She's offering to walk away without claiming the house, in exchange for halting the audit." I laughed once quietly. "That's not how this works." "She's scared," Thomas said. "The audit's revealing things she didn't plan to explain." The next day, Janice found 3 wire transfers from Warren Redman Holdings, not into personal accounts, but directly into marketing payments for Lauren's company. Fake invoices, inflated numbers, money stolen from our joint funds, dressed up to look like business growth. It was fraud, provable, documented, patterned. Thomas forwarded the summary to me with one line. "If we go public, she's finished." But we didn't need to go public. Her investors were already circling. One of them, a VC firm based in Sausalito, requested her full financials. She couldn't produce them. Another sent a formal inquiry to the state attorney general's office, citing potential irregularities. Her next chapter with Reed? That wasn't going well either. A silent source forwarded me an Instagram screenshot. Reed had posted a photo of a mountainside retreat in Oregon. Captioned it, "Clearing space. Resetting." No tags. No Lauren. No mention of the company. 2 days later, she removed every photo of him from her profile. Then she posted a story. Just white text on black. "Rebuilding is painful, but necessary." No one commented. No one reposted. Her audience wasn't listening anymore. Her life, the one she built on clean branding and curated lies, was crumbling faster than I could document it. And still, I stayed quiet. I didn't call. I didn't message. I didn't warn her what was coming next. Because silence had become my sharpest weapon. It happened on a Monday. Lauren had just returned from whatever version of reality she'd been living in, back to a city that no longer welcomed her. At 9:12 a.m., Thomas sent me a screenshot from First Pacific Bank. Her business account had been locked. Not flagged. Not reviewed. Locked. The audit uncovered 6 separate disbursements from our joint funds disguised as consulting fees, all written under fake vendor names tied to her old studio address. Janice's team cross-referenced it with public filings. None of the vendors existed. One was a dead LLC. Another was registered in Florida under a P.O. box that had been inactive since 2017. Thomas filed a motion that morning for preliminary asset recovery. He didn't even need a hearing. The judge granted it based on fraud probability alone. That afternoon, she finally called. I didn't pick up. She called again, and again, then texted, "I know you're behind this. We need to fix it. We're destroying each other." I read it twice. Then I replied, "I'm not destroying anything. I'm just documenting it." Silence. Then, "You're not who I thought you were." That was almost funny, because the man she thought I was, quiet, distracted, conflict-averse, had been watching her build this downfall brick by brick. I didn't need to lift a finger. Just remove the illusions and let gravity do the rest. Later that evening, a friend sent me a screenshot from a private wellness entrepreneur group. Lauren had posted a vague request. "Anyone know a crisis PR firm?" Asking for a client. No one responded, because even in those circles, her curated world of detox quotes and curated aesthetics, the air had turned, and the fall had begun. 10 days later, she caved. Her new attorney, not Barnes, but a junior partner from a smaller firm in Walnut Creek, reached out to Thomas with a proposed settlement. It was laughably vague. No mention of the trust. No mention of the fraud investigation. Just a request to resolve financial misunderstandings amicably. Thomas replied with the final offer. Full forfeiture of any claim to marital assets. Return of all misappropriated funds. $46,200 plus interest. No spousal support. NDA covering all aspects of the divorce, including causes, timelines, and all public commentary. Her lawyer called it aggressive. We called it mercy. 2 days later, she accepted. The signing was scheduled at Thomas's office. Neutral location. No press. No cameras. Just contracts. Lauren showed up alone. No makeup. Hair tied back. Dressed like she wanted to disappear into a crowd of women running errands. Not the woman who once curated herself for followers and investors. She didn't look at me. Didn't speak. She just sat, signed each page, and pushed the folder forward. Thomas reviewed it silently, then nodded. "It's done," he said. I stood to leave. Lauren finally looked up. "There was a time when I really did love you," she said. I paused. "There was a time," I agreed. "That was the last thing we ever said to each other." She left through the back entrance. No statement. No social media recap. No story to reclaim. She had nothing left to spin. The morning after she signed, I drove to the house. It was empty. Silent. The kind of silence that doesn't ask questions anymore. I walked from room to room, not to reminisce, but to catalog. What she left behind wasn't sentimental. It was strategic. Designer shoes without boxes. Skin products nearing expiration. A few framed photos she didn't want to post online anymore. I boxed it all and labeled it simply, "Lauren, final." Sent it to her attorney's office. Then I called the realtor. The house went on the market 2 days later. Cash offer within a week. Bay Area real estate never waits. I didn't even visit the property again. Just signed the papers remotely, watched the wire transfer hit, and smiled. Next, I closed all shared accounts. Canceled every auto payment she once had access to. Rebuilt my financial life with clean lines and no shadows. Then came the digital. Old shared folders? Deleted. Her cloud access? Revoked. 2-factor authentication on everything. New phone number. New passwords. Clean slate. Lauren tried texting once more, from a different number. A screenshot of a photo she'd found on her phone. Us, in Santa Fe, for years ago. She didn't write anything with it. Just the image. I didn't open it. Just blocked the number. Because I no longer needed proof of what we were. I had evidence of what she became. And that was enough. The last move, I restructured the trust. Not to protect it, it was already ironclad, but to redirect it. 20% now went to a scholarship fund in Judith's name. First recipient, a kid from Oakland whose essay opened with, "I know what it's like to be left behind by people who swore they'd stay." Judith would have approved. And me? I just watched the city lights that night from my new apartment downtown. No ghosts, no emails, no next mistake waiting in my inbox. Just the click of closure. 6 months passed. I never saw her again. Not in person, not online. She didn't come for the house. Didn't contest the final disbursements. Never asked about the trust again. She simply vanished. From what I heard, quietly, indirectly, Reed left her 2 months after the signing. Moved to Austin. Started some new project involving financial mindfulness for divorced men. Fitting. Lauren tried to rebuild. Briefly, she launched a new site under a new name. A lifestyle blog heavy on quotes, light on truth. It never gained traction. No investors backed her this time. No editors asked for her opinion. Her voice, once so curated, so confident, had become white noise. I never went looking. Because real closure isn't about knowing what happens next. It's about not needing to. I still get the occasional email meant for both of us. Old mailing lists that haven't been updated. Hey Lauren and Dan, here's a memory from 5 years ago. I archive them without opening. Sometimes I pass the balcony where she once posted photos of sunrise tea and intentional mornings. It's empty now. Just chipped paint, a dead plant in a corner, and a wind chime that only rings when no one's listening. And that's how she left my life. Not with a bang, not with revenge, but with silence. The kind that doesn't echo, just ends.